Hello and welcome to this special debate to you today, brought to you by Business Leader and in association with Memery Crystal. For those of you who don't know much about Business Leader, please visit our website at www.businessleader.co.uk, and to find out more about our Scale Up Month partners, please visit memerycrystal.com. So why are we here today? Well, this event is part of our Scale Up Month, which has seen Business Leader publishing thought leadership and news around this subject. It's become a phrase widely used in common parlance, but we hope this debate will get back to the fundamentals of what it means to be a scale-up business and explore some of the challenges facing scale-up companies themselves. Please do send in your questions. We've already had some come through, which is great. And to debate today, we brought together a stellar panel that includes Karen O'Grady, who's a director at Memery Crystal, Merrilee Carr, who's the CEO Under the Doormat, Abby Liddell, who's Chief Operations Officer at Modo25, Firdaus Nagi, who's the founder of FCI London. We also have Josh Robson, who's Head of External Affairs at the Scale Up Institute, and Anthony Rose, who's the CEO of Seed Legals. So welcome, everyone, and let's kick off with today's debate. Welcome, Josh. I'd like to start the debate with you. As I mentioned in the intro there, the Scale Up Institute is considered the kind of doyen in this space, and you know the kind of concept it's become quite widely used. I guess everyone in business knows it, but I want to start by just getting your kind of definition of what a scale-up company is.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ollie. Good morning, everyone. As many of you know, I mean, the Scale Up Institute was founded back in 2015 following a report into this subject by Sherry Kutu in 2014. And at the time, the idea of a scale-up was very much a fringe idea. It wasn't something that was recognised widely, but it was essentially looking at that stage beyond being a startup. So the definition, this is built on the OECD definition of a scale-up business. It's essentially a business that's at 10 or more employees that's growing at 20% or more in either turnover or employment every year for 3 years. And the reason why that's important, essentially it creates a situation where a company is facing a very particular set of challenges. And in facing those challenges, those companies really much have very much more in common with each other than they perhaps do in terms of the broader sector vertical. So when you're kind of understanding the nature of a scale up, you end up really needing to look at that growth as the starting point. And the reason why we use the OECD definition at the Scale Up Institute is for international comparability. There are a few other situational definitions that some people look at, usually to do with the application or delivery of programs. But when you stray too far outside of that 20% definition, you actually find companies with different challenges, which isn't to say they're not important. It's to say that the programs that are designed to help growth specifically are perhaps either less applicable to them or could perhaps be tuned more effectively to work with a scale-up business.
Thanks, Josh. That's a really clear definition there. And you mentioned the challenges that are quite unique to those companies that are growing at that rate and have that kind of definition. So I'd just like to get your insight, from the data you're seeing at the Scale Up Institute, what are some of those concerns or challenges that companies are facing at the moment and they're telling you about?
Absolutely. So, I mean, scale-ups generally find 5 core challenges, and these are of course different businesses, but the ranking of them often changes as businesses go through different growth phases. The top challenges are generally access to talent, access to markets, access to finance, access to leadership development and infrastructure. But what we've seen over recent years is that those have shifted priority. And what we're seeing increasingly over the recent past is actually markets has now become number one. It's very much access to markets, including domestic markets. This isn't just an international phenomenon, but understanding how a business can access corporates, access government procurement, access international markets. Those are right at the top of the agenda for scale-up businesses. Generally, access to talent has been number one, and what we saw over the last year is that that's actually slipped slightly into second place. But access to talent is still right up there. It's still a really, really burning challenge. Over the last 18 months, we've also seen access to finance increasing, and that's quite a critical element of the overarching scale-up debate. I think the point about finance, one of the things that's interesting about finance is scale-ups usually want finance to do something. This isn't about sort of keeping the fires burning. This is about building a new product line. This is about understanding how to get into a new market. It's about really getting to grips with some of the challenges they're facing as part of their growth, rather than simply keeping payroll.
No, thank you, Josh. That's really interesting. We'll come back on that subject of funding. I just want to talk to Anthony. Welcome, Anthony. You've had a varied career, and you're currently the CEO and founder of, co-founder of Seed Legals. And I know that a lot of the companies you deal with are in the startup space. I just want to get your insight and touch on what Josh has said about what some of the trends you're seeing from those companies that are kind of in the scale-up space. Sorry, Anthony. You're just if you can unmute yourself.
Sorry, great question. So, and of course, as our companies on Seed Legals grow over the years we've been in business, many of our initial startups are now scale-ups. So the obvious answer, exactly as Josh said, would be access to talents and access to market. But I think, and as a scale-up ourselves, I think one of the most fascinating problems is the change in thinking that is needed as you switch from sort of first to second gear. And a great concept that someone has put, which I'd like to go through quickly here, is that if you think about your company as two parts, a startup and a business. And a startup is where you have an idea, it's untested, you don't know if anyone wants it, you're not selling it yet, you probably haven't built it yet. It's all about, move fast, break things, fix things, test things. A business is once you have a product that is selling, the customer acquisition cost, the lifetime value of customers, how much it's going to cost you to support it and so on. And that is your traditional scale-up piece. So in your company, I think the two key challenges you have are, number one, recognizing when it's time to switch from we're in this product line is startup mode. First, we can now start throwing money at marketing, advertising, PR, and so on, because we know that we can sell it. And it's time to stop developing it, in a sense, and get some value out of it. So keeping in mind that your business is these two separate things. The other thing is, as your company starts growing, when you get these different milestones, 10, 30, 100, 200 people, the way you work internally changes. And as the founder and as leaders in the company, you have to reinvent yourself, because the person that is right to head up some section of the business when it's 5 people is not necessarily the same at 50 or 100. So as you start needing to delegate, as you start needing to not be involved yourself, and as your core team that's joined on your mission when you started no longer reports directly to the CEO and now is driven by OKRs and KPIs and monthly targets and so on, that mission, the way of thinking and the way of monetizing changes. So to me, those are the larger challenges, which are switching mindset from startup to business, but yet keeping in mind, if you don't keep that startup mentality, you'll go stale. And that 20%, which I would look at more like 20% a month than a year target, will start slipping, and one day someone will out-disrupt you.
No, thanks, Andy. I just want to touch on something you said there. It's about that growing from kind of 5 to 20 to 100. I guess you lose that kind of span of control as a leader, don't you? I know that you've talked a lot in the past about having a kind of co-founder on board. And in your journey, have you found that really, really important to have someone to kind of sound ideas off and kind of grow with?
For sure. So very quickly, I think there are 3 roles that a company needs. Number one is the domain expert, the doctor, the dialysis, the mother, whatever it is, the mission. Number 2 is the person that's going to help deliver it. That often aligns with the CTO or the product position. And number 3, the Mr. or Ms. Money, the person that aligns with the CFO role that will help get it funded, make it a proper growing business as opposed to just throwing money at the problem. And when you look within, you can see which one or more of these am I. And if you're not all of them, which is very rare that you're all of them, then you want to complement yourself with a co-founder that is some of the others. And our data at Seed Legal shows that startups with 2 founders raise faster and are more successful than companies with 1 or 3 or more than 3 founders. More than 3 usually end up splitting up, so that's not a good sign. So if you can find someone who complements you, not as in says that you're very nice, but does the opposite set of things, I think that's the winning relationship.
Thanks. Yeah, well, as they say, Anthony, 3 is a crowd. So I think 2 seems to be that sweet. But thank you for some insight into the data there. Thank you, Anthony and Josh. We'll come back to you later. I'd just like to bring in Abby, Merrily, and Firdaus into the debate now. All 3 are running their own companies and are active doing so now. So it's going to be good to get their insight. Fred, I'd like to start with you. I mean, touching on what Anthony and Josh have said, looking back at the last 20 years and your experience of sort of scaling FCI London, do you identify with the key kind of challenges that they mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think Anthony really nailed it, right? The difference between 1 million, 3 million, 5 million, 10 million, from a founder's point of view, the roles are so different. And what I was doing at the beginning in terms of trying and testing and actually seeing what the business was, failing quickly, iterating, doing the marketing, doing the finance, doing all these different things, I had to constantly evolve that and grow my role over a period, which was definitely a challenge for me, especially when you're in the business all the time and you're working in the business and you're operationally involved in the business at startup. Looking back now, kind of taking a step back, not that we don't have challenges all the time, all the usual challenges, you know, not enough money, too much money, not enough revenue, too much revenue, at different stages. But for me, where I'm sat now, the two critical things that I wish I had known 20 years ago to the level that I understand it now is that people are super, super important, right? Getting the right people on the bus, getting the right people in the right seats, and really looking and optimizing the people and making sure that they are happy, which sounds really corny, is so pivotal to the success and the speed that we now move at. And I've learned that the hard way over the last 20 years, and hopefully I'm better at it now than I was at the beginning. And then the other very, very challenging thing, which is also completely linked to people, is the culture of the business. Because when you're 5 people or 10 people, you are the culture. You're very much at the heart of the culture, and you don't even talk about culture. Really, it just is there. As you grow beyond those numbers and layers of management come in, and you're not talking to every single person every single day, you don't know everybody's birthdays, etc., then the culture that grows in the business is super important to how you're going to scale and ultimately who you are. And keeping an eye on that for us has been really, really important, because we did, you know, it slipped away for a moment when we had some explosive growth and we had to bring in a whole bunch of people, and we brought people in specifically to do roles rather than really hiring for culture. Our whole process is completely different now. And I would say for scaling businesses, especially those who've come from startups, keeping an eye on that culture and knowing the culture is absolutely critical.
Thanks for that. I know you touched on it there, but just to give a sort of takeaway to our viewers who are maybe in that growth phase now, about how they can kind of build a strong culture that allows them to scale, but also look after people. What would be your advice that you'd give from your learnings?
From my learnings, most people do these strategy days where they go off and they go, what's our mission? What's our vision? What are our core values? You know, let's make a nice infographic about it. Let's put it as a screensaver. And that's all great. But I think actually really nailing your culture, right? Nailing your core values, sorry. And knowing what those core values are and editing them over a period if you find that something is not relevant or you've missed something out, and having 4 or 5 real core values that everybody in the company, not just the leadership team, like really believe in, and then using that for decision making. Whenever there's a problem, go back to the core values. Whenever you're hiring, go back to the core values. Have that as part of your day-to-day. You know, it's in your process. It's like any other operational process, like, you know, switching on the website or opening your store or starting the ovens if you're a bakery or whatever it is. Everything should be looking back at those core values and going, are we aligned with this stuff? And especially using it to problem solve when there's challenges, whether they're customer facing, supplier facing, internal problems. Go back to the core values, and that for me, in the last 7 or 8 years, I'd say, maybe even less, has been a really easy way to go, right, are people in the business aligned to our culture? And then being really, really quick. You know, we've all talked about hire slow and fire fast. And fire is probably not the word I would use, but move people out of the business who are not following that culture that you've set up in those core values. And don't be scared about doing it, because I personally have never moved someone on and then after doing that thought, oh, you know, that was the wrong decision. I've always thought I should have done it quicker. Better for them, better for the rest of the team, better for the business.
Thanks, for some really good advice there, I think, for people who are on that scale up journey. So thank you for that, and we will come back to Abby. I'd just like to welcome you to the debate and welcome this morning. I just want to, following on from kind of Ferdas, a similar question really. What have been the kind of core challenges you faced in kind of scaling and growing your company?
Cool. Hi. Well, for us, I think I would agree with Ferdas's point about it being all around people. For us, I'm a co-founder with John Redmond at Modo 25. We have a performance marketing agency. We've also built a marketing intelligence platform. We had secured initial seed investment from an investor, and that allowed us to move at pace. And the most important thing for us was to find the experienced talent that we needed to specify, design, and build our performance digital marketing platform in order to launch a beta version in mid-March. So we moved very quickly in order to do that. We hit a bit of a stall in March 2020, of course, but we believe that it would be really incredibly important to push through that, and with the talent that we had, with the experience, we were able to pivot, continue what we were doing, and then we've also, as well as talking to investors, we've also looked at government grants as well. The government, through Innovate UK, launched competitions for grants that were helping sectors to come out the other side of COVID-19. And putting those bids together and winning that gave us further credibility and confidence and sort of the external validation of what we were doing. So then when we went through another round of seed funding, approaching angel investors within our network, we really felt validated. And for us, what we wanted to do is help fund that launch in the UK and the US. We've always been open to advice. So the advice that had been given to us was, when you're approaching potential investors, actually asking for advice and feedback on the deck and the presentation that you've put together is a good way of starting that conversation. At worst, you're going to get really valuable feedback and advice on the approach you should take, but actually it's a brilliant way to start a conversation with people that you feel will already be interested in what you're doing, and spark their interest and their involvement and their engagement, and that way we secured more investment. We'd also been advise that asking one of your own clients to invest in you is another way of showing those other investors your confidence and the validation in your proposition as well, and we did that too, and that's worked well for us as well. So so continuing to sort of to build our product with the right people, and then with a group of investors who really believe in what we're doing as well, is working well for us so far.
No, thanks, Abby. Clearly a good message there of getting the right investors on board, isn't it? And probably taking some time at the front end to make sure they fit your kind of business mission. So thank you for that, Abby. Memery, welcome to the debate. Memery, you're CEO of Under the Doormat. So just, following on from Ferdas and Abby, just want to find out what you found to be the sort of core challenges that you faced in your company and scaling it.
Well, I mean, agree very much with some of the challenges they've spoken about, but just to kind of expand out a little bit, I think one of the things when you're a startup is that, especially when you're trying to win clients that are large companies and things like that, it's all about credibility. And it's about that trust that they would have to choose you over someone else that may have been around for years, that they may have worked with in the past. And I think especially in our sector, we work in short-term rentals and holiday rentals, and our sector is sometimes seen as a bit cowboyish, the whole Airbnb market and all these types of things. So one of the things that I did early days was get involved in setting up the industry association and working with government to set the standards for our industry, and then leading the way. So being the first to be accredited in the UK, and those types of things, getting an insurance policy backed by Lloyd's of London. So I think all of that's helped. And, you know, just last year we landed our first deal with one of the great estates, with Cadogan Estates. So we now manage 3 Sloane Gardens, which is a boutique apart hotel. And that helps a lot with conversations that then we have with other potential clients. So I think that's been for us really important, is being clear from the outset of what our standards were. Sometimes that meant that we saw competitors growing quicker than us, but then also collapsing and some of them going bankrupt. So, you know, it's one of these things of having your clear strategy, knowing what it is, knowing who you are and sticking to that, because it sometimes might not always mean that you're the quickest to grow, but you're clear about who you are, you're building a brand, you're building a reputation, and then over time, the opportunities start coming in a much bigger way. And I just don't think you can, you know, you can't speed up reputation. That's something that's earned and that takes a little bit of time. So I think that's one thing that we found. I think access to capital is of course one of the things that we all talk about. And I think for us, that has also been an interesting one. We've gone down the route of angels and family offices rather than the VC route, because we really wanted strategic capital. So we wanted people who had an interest in the property and the hospitality markets where we come from, so that we would gain access to new clients and new opportunities off of the back of investment rather than just cash, which is often a little bit the VC way, no matter how much they say that they bring expertise and other things into the mix. And so we found that to be a really great way to access capital and access opportunities at the same time. But I think, you know, as our tech arm grows and everything else, then looking at that institutional capital and VCs may also be something that we look at in the future. So I also think, you know, it's about choosing the right opportunities at the right time, and also being prepared to evolve those strategies as you go.
No, thanks, Mary. Nice takeaway there. You can't speed up reputation. I think that's really important, because you can grow very, very fast, can't you? But like you say, fail, but that kind of honest, sustained growth will bear fruit in the end. And so thank you, Marilyn. We'll come back to you. Karen, I just want to bring you into the debate. So welcome this morning. Karen is a director at Memery Crystal, a law firm. And I just want to, a lot of people have talked about some of the challenges you're facing. I want to firstly get your insight into the kind of things your clients tell you, but also, you know, that how you can help with that procedural stuff, how you can kind of support, and also the importance of network, you know, external networks for leaders as they grow their business. Karen.
Hi, Ollie. Thanks for having us with you. So what strikes me, I guess, we work with lots of early stage companies. And what strikes me when I meet founders is how incredibly lonely that process can be, and you know, particularly at that early stage. Often there's 2 founders, and it's their first jaunt into establishing their own company. They may have, you know, worked at a big corporate previously and have exited that and suddenly find themselves on their own or just with a co-founder and trying to be lean. So access to networks and contacts is particularly important to them. And that involves a whole host of people, people who can help them on the legals, which, you know, where we come in, people who are within the investment community, so angels or access to sort of contacts at venture capital. That sort of leads into sort of the access to funds point. And for most angel investors or venture capital, they like to see warm introductions. It's very rare that you can send off a pitch document completely cold and have a positive response from that. Venture capital funds particularly receive hundreds, if not thousands, of these applications every year. And so they don't take the time necessarily to go through each of them. So if you have that warm introduction, that helps. Founders have to deal with a lot beyond their core idea, and they may not have that expertise in each area. So when they have an established network, they are able to go and reach out to that community and say, can you help me with this? In return, I'll help you with something else. And so for us, that is something that we have tried to help our founders build. So we have networks of investors, of expertise in different areas, and we try and connect our clients together and connect them with the investors that, you know, in some cases are our clients, but in some cases are our contacts. So just helping them access that ecosystem, I guess, is what we feel that they sometimes struggle with, particularly when it's their first experience.
No, thank you, Karen. Some really interesting points now. And we've all, on the panel today, talked about funding and access to capital. I just want to kind of touch on that in a bit more detail. And I want to ask yourself, Josh, if I'm watching this debate now, I'm in that kind of scale up phase. And, you know, I just want to get your insight, the difference between the funding you'd look for when you're starting up to the funding you might look for when you're scaling up, and what options that companies should be looking for.
Well, absolutely. A couple of things which it's worth picking up on, actually. In terms of previous discussions, I mean, the leadership challenge and the kind of access to finance challenge are actually quite linked. And so I think the way of thinking about this as a kind of overarching piece, a lot of the people just gone talked about the value of culture, leadership, 100%. I mean, when I say that the top three challenges that Scale Up's talking about are access to markets, access to talent, and access to finance, that doesn't mean that they don't see leadership development as critical. What we're seeing over recent years is an increasing number of programs that are out there to help meet that need, which is really positive, actually. And I think that that's something which, just to really sort of assuage some fears, you know, there are things out there to help scale ups that are looking to improve their culture and understand how they can make that leadership step change. What there are fewer programs to deal with are access to markets, or integrating the finance challenge with some of the more critical elements of that market access challenge, or indeed putting together, whether it's NEDs or others, to help them understand their options. I think in terms of what a scale up should be looking for, I think, you know, what people have just said is really important. You need to find money that works for you, and I think that Memery's kind of perspective on this, of understanding money that fits with the business that you're looking to build, is really critical here. And I think, you know, businesses will have made a series of choices as they go through their early stages and their growth stages, and some of these may be quite old choices. I mean, many scale ups are actually more than 10 or sometimes even more than 20 or 30 years old. This is not necessarily a business that's been started immediately, but when you do make choices about how to access capital, they sometimes stick with you for a while. So I think the important thing for a business is to really think carefully about what it is they're trying to do, what they need the money for, and then really go out there and meet people, find opportunities. And I think there are some great tools that are emerging. The Finance Hub by the British Business Bank is a really interesting way of demystifying some of the things that are going on around sort of equity and other things which are available, and just sort of making sure that they have sort of a core base of understanding, and then working with other sort of people in their networks to sort of really understand that. And I think networks, which Karen was just talking about, is critical. There are an emerging set of account managed networks which are out there. Innovate UK, which has also been mentioned, really important source of finance, particularly for innovative businesses, and the majority of scale ups are highly innovative. So I think understanding and really categorizing your options, and then thinking carefully about the type of money that you actually want and what that brings with it is really important. And I think that goes right the way down to understanding the nature of the business and where it is in that growth journey, right the way through to, are there board structures in place? Do you have the right people to manage that type of money coming in? Do you have the right people in place and the right processes in place to make best use of that money when you brought it into the business?
No, thanks, Josh. Anthony, I don't know if you wanted to kind of build on that in terms of what Josh has kind of covered there, and any advice you could give, because like Josh said, that, you know, there's so many options out there, and sometimes demystifying it can be a challenge, can't it?
Sure. So, you know, the irony is the time when it's easiest to raise money is when you don't need to raise money. If your business is tripling year on year and you're in the news everywhere, investors will be calling you and you'll be turning them away in droves every week. And of course, you'll have in your mind that you reached out to them several years ago and they didn't return your call as you hit delete on their email. So the reality is, in an early stage, when you're still startup, when you don't have a product, investors are going to be investing in you, and it's often going to be angel investors in the UK looking for their SEIS and their EIS to de-risk their business. So early on, you want to start approaching angel investors, and raising capital has really never been easier. The legals, when you have a legal tech platform like Seed Legals, is insanely easy. lots of investors looking for SEIS and EIS. Thanks to SEIS and EIS, they get ordinary shares. So many of the things that used to be really onerous with preference shares and non-dilution and other nonsense have disappeared. So your first round is all about acting and having investors perceive that you're much bigger than you really are. They want to see you in the news everywhere. So get out, be shameless, post on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. I mean, you know, don't be seriously annoying and way too woke, but you want to be everywhere so that investors believe that you're larger than you are. The other thing is, don't go to VCs too early, because VCs will generally invest once you have revenue. So if you go to a VC and you're looking to raise, you know, 200K or whatever it might be, they're going to go, you guys are awesome, we love you, come back later. And it's the story of your life. So with investment, as long as you realize that investors are going to be really switching gears in their thinking, which is initially there's no product, there's no revenue, so they're betting on you. Later on, there's revenue, there's a growth chart, there's traction, and actually the founders and idea become less relevant the later stage company it is, when the investor simply looks at that nice month-on-month growth. And there you're going to be looking to raise from VCs, and you're going to be expecting VC deal terms in return. So short answer is, try to act as big as you can, as early as you can, get out and make as much noise as you can, and run it like a military operation. If your investors perceive that this is a hobby on the side and you're doing other things, they will find someone else to invest in. If they see that this is the mission, both with the team and the products and the change the world, and you can create this fear of missing out, because ultimately lots of people come to investors. You want to stick out as the one that they're going to regret missing later.
No, thank you, Anthony. Some really, really good advice there. Phil, I saw you nodding there. Is there anything you wanted to add there? And it'd be interesting to hear about your kind of funding journey as well.
I haven't met Anthony, but he nailed it again. I mean, he's got it spot on. As a founder, but also an angel investor, I see both sides of the kind of the challenge. And it really is about the founders at the early stage. You know, 200, 300K. You don't have a proof of concept. You might have a great mission and a vision. You might have something interesting, but none of the projections. You know, I see sometimes decks that have got 2-year, 5-year, 10-year projections at that early stage, and I'm like, forget it. Nobody can predict that type of time frame. So really, we're looking at the founders. I'm looking at the relationship between the founders as well. When I'm thinking about, am I going to give my hard-earned post-tax money to these people? So to founders, I think, put yourself in the shoes of the investor. Don't look at the investor as a big piggy bank. Why are they going to put? They've been on a journey. They've done the hard work. They've done the sweat in order to have this money to be able to invest as angels. So what are you going to do to convince them that you're worth the bet, right? And that's really important. I think, again, for me, the numbers are extremely important. The spreadsheets are really important. Very often, founders spend a lot of time on pretty snazzy looking decks with getting the font right and the graphics and all of that, and you kind of get to the nuts and bolts and what is your cost, you know, per acquisition, how much traffic are you going to get, depending on the business, right? What's your CTR? What's your ROI on the money that you're going to spend? What's your multi-channel kind of attack in terms of how you're going to do your digital? So having that kind of level of specificity, I think, in the deck is really, really important, rather than just saying, you know, it's a 1.5 billion market size and in 5 years we're going to do this, and you know, that's great, but at the beginning, when you're going for 200, 300K, I think be really, really clear and humble about what you're planning to do with that money. Be really specific where every single penny is going to go. Don't give me a pie chart with 3 sections going marketing, this, that. Be really specific and granular where all my money is going to go if I invest in you. And I think, again, to I think it was Meryl's point, strategic money is really important at the early stage. You've got to find angels who love you, who love what you're doing, because it's not just about the money. They've really got to cheerlead. They're usually going to take a board seat. They're going to have a massive impact on what happens at the beginning. They've done business before, usually. They understand the landscape. And if that chemistry is not there, they might have industry knowledge, they might have industry connections, but if that personal chemistry, you're not feeling it, and it's just a check, I would, I would be really careful about that, because the investments that I've made, the successful ones, are the ones where I've got chemistry, because I just want to spend more time with those founders. I want to answer their phone calls. I want to respond to their emails. I'm rooting for their success. And it sounds very ideological, but if you can get that, and if you can spend time getting that in your first group of investors, then I think the challenges that you'll face will be weathered better.
Okay, thank you for some really good advice. We've had some questions come in from people, like I mentioned earlier, so we will go to it. But before we do, I just wanted to talk to you, Memery, because you mentioned in your opening pitch that you're now looking at that next stage of funding and you might change tack. I just want to get a quick summary of where you see yourself going and how important retaining control is as well.
Yes, so from our side, we've built over the last sort of 18 months our tech side, and so there's a different need for capital to scale that up at a global level. So where previously we focused on the family offices and the angel investors, we raised our first 2.5 million in capital through those channels. Now we're beginning, literally just this month, to start talking to VCs and more institutional capital. So larger family offices who often also have an interest or property assets in their portfolio, as well as, I would say, more specialist VCs. So in the hospitality and the property sectors, so that they understand our sector and really understand what the opportunity is. Because, when I talk to generalist investors, they're like, oh, you're in the hospitality sector, this is a disaster with COVID. But in actual fact, the last year for us has been incredible, because we spearheaded NHS Homes, which was an industry-wide initiative, and we had more than 20 million pounds worth of free stays for NHS workers. We then got an Innovate UK grant to turn that into a commercially viable model, and we now have more than 100 companies, all professional operators across our sector, that are trusted stays. And that platform is now something that we've won the first ever government RFP in our sector, and we're getting into corporate and the global distribution system, which is something no one in our industry has done before. So we need people who understand the size of that opportunity. And so I just don't think the generalist VCs will, but people who understand, the hospitality market, the hotel market, the GDS systems, all these things, they understand how difficult that is, and they understand why that's a big opportunity. And people in property understand it because they know they've got assets that need to be earning incremental yields. And the flexible models that we work with can actually help them, not just to get a return on their investment by investing in us, but also that immediately we could give them a return on investment on their own portfolio of assets. And so that's our strategy at the moment, and the types of people we want to be speaking to about investing in our next phase of growth.
Memery, and apologies if I had some mic problems, and I think we have hopefully sorted now. Well, on to the fun part. We've got some questions from our audience. The first one is, when you're experiencing explosive growth, how do you keep your finger on the pulse of your brand and ensure that it's keeping in line with your kind of values? It's something we sort of touched on earlier, but I don't know who wants to kind of take that question on.
I can hop in if that's okay. So my take is you need to be obsessed with a customer-driven culture. That means from the CEO upwards or downwards, depending on how you regard the rest of your company, then you want everyone to be on a mission to look religiously at what customers are doing and to build the business based on that. So at Seed Legals, one of the problems that businesses have is they interact with a few people in the business interact with customers, and the rest, the developers, sit blithely in the background coding away. At Seed Legals, people principally interact with us with web chat, and everyone gets to see, where relevant, the web chats, and where the support team need help, they'll escalate that to Slack, and the developers, myself, we're all part of it. So every time somebody has an issue, we'll all see there's an issue, and we'll all be thinking, developers, marketing, sales, legal team, on how we create something that a person never has that type of issue again. So if you're religiously focused on an awesome customer experience and setting the entire company to work based on that, then I think that's a good starting point. And it takes me back to actually my BBC iPlayer days where, my competitor ITV, for example, their management were always talking about using big data and analytics. And I was looking at their Twitter feed and the word shit appeared in most of the tweets against their product. And I was thinking, CEO, stop talking about big data. Just look at what customers are saying about your product directly and don't build new stuff until you fix this stuff. So it's really just keeping an eye on your customers and creating that awesome experience that I think then sets the rest of the business tone in the right way.
Thanks, Anthony. We certainly don't want that on any of our Twitter feeds. And Abby, obviously, Modo25. If when you consider that question, what would you say are the key fundamentals that you need?
I think going back to what's already been said, sort of having the right people, all being passionate about what you're doing so that everybody's interested in understanding what the customer feedback is, making the product as amazing as it can be, reflecting the values that you have. I mean, everything that I think that we've spoken about, from your investors to your founders, to everybody within the team, if you're all pulling in the same direction, it's in all of your interests to make sure it's as good as it can be, and to take the feedback and to have that sort of that validation and potentially that criticism that comes back, and then build on that, and then together you're improving it.
So thank you, Abby. And Karen, is there something you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, so I guess from our perspective, we see companies when they're coming to fundraise and they're trying to balance that with continuing their business. So part of the growth journey is raising this financing, and one thing that we find is that founders don't necessarily understand the amount of time that's going to take, and the amount of time it sort of distracts from their running of the business in actuality, because fundraising and the process around it can often be very time consuming. And so we try and encourage our clients to reach out to us very early and to get prepared for that fundraising, so that it becomes less burdensome on them and they can balance it out, particularly when they're at the earlier stage and they've got leaner teams, that they're taking more time to prepare, so that the actual process of fundraising and dealing with that transaction isn't as painful, and that they can keep an eye on their business more and ensure that that's not failing because they're focusing hugely on the particular transaction that's going on. And as they get through that growth journey and get to bigger and bigger funding, that we find, because they've got into that discipline earlier on, that they are better able to cope with as the funding rounds progress.
For that, we're just going to move on to our next question that we've had sent in. It's someone said, I'm a female leader of business that I consider to be a scale up, so hopefully they meet your definition that you set out, Josh. I mean, are we seeing more funding being accessed by female business? I know that the Scale Up Institute have done some kind of research around this, Josh. I'll just start with you, if that's okay.
Absolutely. And I think, there are challenges that female founders have faced in terms of accessing funding, but that is sort of hopefully changing. We publish a female founder index every year, which looks at visible scale up. So these are businesses which are essentially over 10.2 million in size. So they're easier to track. We can see a range of factors around them and then track the money that they're getting. And actually this year, we saw a 93% increase in the number of female funded businesses that are breaking through that £10.2 million barrier. So, I mean, that's fantastic, but there is still a long way to go, because when you look at that in terms of the overarching picture of scale ups, it's not as many as there could be. And I know there was a lot of work that's been done on this in the Rose Review and other things which we contributed to, which has really looked at some of the challenges that female founders do face in relation to accessing funding and also wider services as they go through their growth journey. But there is movement, and I think that's the important thing. And it's also worth recognizing that if you look at who's funding those businesses that have broken through, that are founded by women, actually they have a different sort of there's a different set of funds and others that are really accessing that. So I think it's important to really kind of champion the benefits of helping women who are growing businesses to access that money, and realizing that actually these are businesses that are showing some fantastic growth.
Thanks, Josh. And Mary Lee, did you want to kind of follow on from what Josh has just said?
Yeah, I mean, look, just being really transparent and honest, depending on what figures you look at, I think for actual female-founded companies, not just female on the leadership team, it's like 3% of funds go to these companies. So as a female founder, that can look really daunting. But my experience is that, again, it comes back to in the early stages, people are going to invest in you because they believe in you. So, I think there is a challenge because there are a lot of women who decide to just set up a business on the side because they don't want to be back into the corporate world after they've had kids and these sorts of things. And so I think it's really clearly establishing yourself as someone who is 150% into this business, that this is not just a leisure business on the side. This is actually something that you're doing properly. And when people really understand that that's what you're doing, then that automatically puts you in a different category. I think the second thing is then once you get your initial investment, which is almost always going to be from people who know you and believe in you already, then it's all about getting traction. So I think it's what was mentioned earlier. It's like in your deck, having the numbers, not being afraid to talk about metrics and numbers and those sorts of things, because I think sometimes there's a perception, that women are not as good at the analytical side and the finance side. And if you can nail that, to be perfectly honest, most investors care about those things more than who the founder is, quite honestly. So, it is knowing what you can do so that people don't put you in a box, which is, oh, this is just a leisure business, but actually they see you as a serious entrepreneur, because once they see you through a lens of a serious entrepreneur, they're going to evaluate you similarly to other businesses. And if they think you're a great opportunity, they're going to invest. I personally have not found that going down the route of like, funds that focus on female-founded businesses and those sorts of things is actually the way to go. I actually think just go out there, compete in the world together with everyone else. And if you've got a strong proposition, people are going to want to invest. I've got I actually have more male investors than female investors, because whether we like it or not, the investor community is still made up of more male investors. But I've felt like, maybe once or twice there's been a situation where I think, if it had been one of the guys on my leadership team pitching, would they have maybe had a better chance of succeeding? But you know what? Actually, no matter who you are and what you are, there will always be people you get on with and some people you don't. And I want investors who believe in me, and I want investors who believe in my business. And so there will always be some that aren't that right fit, whether you're a female or anything else. So I just think go out there and go for it, because the more of us who do and the more of us who raise money through normal channels, the more normal it becomes.
No, thanks, Mary. Some good advice there. Just go out there and go for it. So a nice rallying cry there. And Karen, just briefly, I know you want to talk about the VC investors. So we have one more question from our audience, but Karen, if you could just briefly cover that.
Yeah, so I think one thing we see is that when you, and I think Memery did touch on this, is that when you go out to the investor community, it is predominantly male, and it's predominantly white male, sort of privately educated investors that you are talking to. And I think the VC investment community has a lot to answer for there. I think if we saw more diversity at that level, we would probably be seeing more diversity in the types of founder teams that they are investing in. So I think it is obviously getting better, and I think the stats bear that out, but the stats also bear out that there is a long way to go. And so we have started working particularly with female groups and networks of investors, because they have then this particular interest in investing in female founded businesses, and so that community is being built, but there is a long way to go.
No, thank you, Karen. I just want to bring in now our final question from our audience. It's a nice one. It's nice and topical. I think it's going to come up. Now, we are hearing a lot about the levelling up agenda. It's government policy at the moment. But are we seeing more scale-up companies being formed outside of London that meet that scale-up criteria? I guess, Josh, this is probably one for you as well, with your kind of your kind of scale-up institute hat on there.
Absolutely, and it's a good question. It's an interesting way of sort of linking back to sort of the first question you asked me about the definition. And I think let's just revisit what a scale-up is. I mean, scale-up businesses are pretty critical to the UK economy as a whole. This isn't about sort of a particular local area in London southeast. Essentially, we've got sort of 5.7, 5.8, 5.9 million SMEs in the UK, generating about 2.2 trillion to the UK economy. Half of that turnover comes from about 33,400 companies, which are the scale-up companies. That's pretty huge. Those 33,000 companies generate 1.1 trillion. But the really good point is that about 74% of those are outside of London already. So this is not a London phenomenon, and they're across all sectors. This isn't just tech. This is about people who make auto parts. This is about people doing food processing and manufacturing, and they're based in quite diverse communities around the UK. But what I think is really critical off the back of that point is to recognise what that then means for the overarching ecosystems and environments that exist to support those businesses. And I think one of the things that's been really interesting hearing from people across the panel and others in terms of the journey is that actually the support that's out there can be quite patchy and quite hard to navigate for businesses that are doing that. So I think one of the things that's really critical as a takeaway from this is, how do businesses that are from diverse sectors, with founders from diverse backgrounds, how are the networks around them built, and how are the ecosystems around them functioning, especially outside of London? Because even though a lot of the businesses are not outside of London, and there are initiatives that are kind of in existence, whether it's Scale Up Northeast in and around Newcastle, or indeed sort of down in the southwest around Engine Shed and Rocket Makers and other sort of initiatives around that, how are they sort of organising themselves as ecosystems, and what can other areas learn from them to sort of help those companies that are outside of London? I think there's a really, really critical sort of lesson there for everyone, because ultimately businesses that are scaling up don't have the time to find these services necessarily themselves. They're kind of running they're redlining all the way through because they've got so many things on their plate as they really go for growth. And I think it's really important that there are things that wrap around these businesses to sort of help them understand what their options are. And we're seeing around these ecosystems as sort of an account management thing. And we know that the majority of businesses in our survey, which we do each year, about 600-700 scale-up businesses do the survey each year, are actually really keen for a single point of contact in their local area, rooted in an understanding of what's going on locally to help them navigate that. Whether that's peer-to-peer networks to help them understand what's out there to really connect them into other businesses that are growing in similar ways to them, or whether it's funding or whether it's other things. That sort of account management piece is really critical, just because it takes the pressure off and it helps a business, whether it's in London or in Newcastle or in Birmingham, to understand how they can really tap into the support that's available.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Interesting about the ecosystem there, and the single point of contact being important for businesses, something that they want. It's something definitely to consider going forward. Karen, we do have a little bit of time left if you wanted to kind of come in here.
There's a great stat in the BVCA report for last year, which says that the UK as a whole has 35% of unicorns in Europe's unicorns, and half of those unicorns are in the northwest. So there's six of those unicorns the UK saw were in the northwest. So it really isn't a London-centric place to be.
Karen, and we're going to end the debate there. We're nicely on about 6 minutes to go until the end. So we'll just go to final comments from our audience, and we'll start. It's also Abby. Do you want to say thank you for your time today? A final word for our panel.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Yeah, I've said it before, but I will go for people really being absolutely crucial to us, and finding the people, experienced people, as well as supporting kind of young people as well. That's and having some purpose behind what we do as well has been really key for us, which has also, I think, helped us get investors on board as well.
Brilliant, thank you, Abby. And Firdaus, thank you for your insight as well, and your honesty about the growth you've had at FCI.
Yeah, I mean, again, if we're talking about takeaway points, I would say as early as possible, understand who you want in the team. Try to genuinely care about the people, especially, you know, at the beginning, and understand what drives them. And in terms of technology and tools, implement those from the beginning. So whether you're talking about project management tools or you're talking about NPS tools, whatever you're going to do it from the beginning, so that you're monitoring and measuring everything from day one. Even though you might be measuring things that are very small numbers to start with, you know, the measurement of that stuff is critical. And sometimes when we're running at 100 miles an hour at the beginning, we can forget to do that.
Right, thank you, Fred. That's some good advice there. Memery, thank you. Your final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think setting up your own business is the most exciting thing you'll probably ever do. And I think the one thing I would say is that it is in many ways a test of resilience. I mean, you know, look, no one expected COVID to happen. I think that's tested every single entrepreneur. And I think if you see it as a roller coaster and you understand there will be those ups, there will be those downs, and actually often success is about taking those steps every day, and making sure that you're headed in the right direction, you're clear on your strategy, you support your team. But it is just waking up every day, having that excitement and continuing no matter how hard it gets, and no matter what's going on outside of you, because you're kind of steering that ship. You're the captain. Everyone looks to you. And I think, you know, it's important as well to make sure that you've got your own support, whether that's through, you know, groups. I'm part of the Supper Club, which is a group of CEOs, you know, or through many of the other programs and things out there that exist, because you know, ultimately it's a tough journey and there will be good days and bad days. But I think, you know, if you've got that resilience and that strength and you've got that support, the reality is, you know, you've got every chance of success. And also, you know, this is the best job you'll ever have, and the best thing you can ever do to build something, create something, and see the results of all that hard work.
No, thanks, Memery. And Anthony, thank you for your time as well.
Thank you. So as a founder, your natural temperament is to see everything as an opportunity. If you read the paper and everything's a problem, you're probably not a founder. If you look and see Brexit, COVID, whatever, opportunity, whenever the world is changing, there's my opportunity. And then you want to build a product that people want. Too often you see websites that say what you do. We do legal tech contract, then 0 people wake up in the morning looking for contract automation. So make sure your pitch deck and your website show what people want. And then the next, maybe most important thing is not to drink too much of your own Kool-Aid. So the idea is, as a leader, you want to inspire your team to follow you. You want investors to want to invest in you. But if you drink too much of your own Kool-Aid and you believe your own hype, you'll believe you're invincible. You'll believe that, you know, miracles will happen just because you wish them, and it won't. So, you know, that constant iteration, that constant looking at customers and your team. And then, of course, as you get to scaling, you've got your own set of scaling challenges, which is to delegate and reinvent yourself. And if you can do all of those, my son, then you're right to be a founder. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Some good advice there. And Josh, thank you for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely, thanks. It's been really good to be part of the discussion. I mean, I think the takeaway points from this are absolutely, and that's backed up by the data. You know, scale-ups are really innovative. The top reason for raising money during the pandemic with innovation followed by job creation. So, you know, businesses out there are going great guns. They're hungry to grow and they're hungry to access new markets. I think the challenge is always just making sure that the right support structures can keep up with them and make sure that as businesses are growing, they can be supported in that journey.
No, thanks, Josh. And Karen, thank you to yourself and Memery Crystal for supporting this wonderful Scale Up Month and highlighting some of the great companies. A final thought from you.
Yeah, so I just wanted to end on a positive note, really. It's been a great first quarter to the year in terms of investment. It's up 25% against the last quarter of last year. So, you know, despite Brexit, despite COVID, it's a great space to be in. And you know, to my sort of earlier point, create your network, reach out to it, and make the most of it.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you for everyone for viewing today. And please do visit the Business Leader website to find out more about our events and Scale Up Month.